Welcome to Unforbidden Truth. I'm Andrew. Today I'll be speaking with Gavin Collins, a convicted murderer serving a 75-year prison sentence. Collins was convicted for the shooting death of Jose Escobar Menendez after he lured Jose to Emerald Point Terrace around 2 a.m. by sending him a nude photo where he and accomplice Joshua Mark Hunter lay await in a car. Upon Jose's arrival, Collins shot him in the neck at close range, then fled with his car, while Hunter followed in another vehicle. Collins was under the influence of meth, and he later sold the car to buy drugs. The .45 caliber semi-automatic pistol that was used in the crime was discovered in a nightstand drawer of a hotel room in Sterling, Virginia, where Collins was staying during a July 2020 search. Joshua Hunter, initially charged with first-degree murder, later plea bargained in September to voluntary manslaughter and carjacking, receiving a 25-year prison sentence. Gavin Collins received a 75-year prison sentence for his role in the crime. Here's my interview with convicted murderer Gavin Collins.
My name is Gavin Collins. I've born and raised in Virginia, primarily Northern Virginia, Loudoun County.
So, can you recall any positive memories that stick out to you from your childhood?
Do you want some specific ones? I've got a
Yeah,
few.
like anything that sticks out to you in your mind that was like good memories from your childhood.
Spending the weekends with my grandparents. It covers a whole bunch of things, but I don't have. I mean, there was a couple of times that my father took me and my youngest brother fishing and stuff like that, or we went camping. But those instances were pretty few and far between. But most of the fond memories that I find myself literally reliving in my dreams are of times I spent with my father's parents.
So, can you recall any negative memories that stick out to you from your childhood?
Oh, yeah. There's a bunch. I think some of the very first, earliest memories I have are of my mother and my father having physical fights in the house. And then when I was about 6-7 years old, my mother, who up until that time had been my primary caretaker, she left. My parents had been, not really seeing one another. So my mother was seeing another man who was from London, and she'd go visit him occasionally. But one of the times she went to visit him, she was supposed to be gone a week, never came back. And so I remember that the day that she left pretty vividly. I've early on in childhood, I experienced, basically every kind of abuse you can imagine at one time or another.
Okay, and that brings me to my next question, which is, did you suffer any abuse or trauma growing up? So can you talk about the abuse that you did suffer?
Well, when I think the earliest form that the abuse had taken was just severe neglect. Both of my parents used hard drugs and weren't all. Sometimes they weren't even physically present. You know what I mean? But it started off as neglect, and then obviously the turmoil between my parents led it to become physical, and my father would come home drunk and high and be mad about, stupid things like, the house was a mess, or the food wasn't cooked and ready for him, and he'd get screaming at my mom, and she'd scream back, and then he'd start hitting her, and even at 5 and 6 years old, it bothered me enough to where I would try to get in the middle of the altercation, and that would lead to me being beaten and thrown around. By the time that my mother left and I ended up in my father's sole custody, we ended up moving to a little town called Strasburg, and one of the, it was a very, very small town, and I was pretty much ostracized because I was the only person that was living there at the time that hadn't been born there, basically, or at least in the age group that I was in at the time. There was some other forms of physical abuse from one of my babysitters at that period of time, physical and sexual. And that went on from the ages of like 8 to 10. At the age of 10, we ended up moving in with my father's, at that time, girlfriend, who later became his wife, and that's when we ended up moving to a place called Sterling, Virginia. And, again, there was a lot of a lot of bullying from other kids at first because, we moved to a new place, and kids can be cruel to people that they don't know, you know what I mean? The physical abuse from my father stopped because he got clean, but at that point, we were very, there was just distance, you know what I mean? It was almost like he didn't know how to interact with me and my siblings. So it was like I lived with someone I didn't really know, you know what I mean? And there wasn't really any effort made to bridge that gap. I think that he did as best as he could. He just didn't know how to parent, you know what I mean? There's a lot of there's a lot, a lot of negative memories from growing up. They're a lot more plentiful than the positive ones, and I hate sitting around and talking about it, like making it sound as though I had the roughest, upbringing ever, because I know so many people have it worse, but it's a lot of different types of abuse, you know what I mean? I'm pretty sure all of them at one point or another.
Right. Yeah, most definitely. Abuse is abuse no matter what it is, whether it's physical, mental, emotional. It always takes its toll on somebody regardless of how strong somebody claims to be or is.
Right.
So, what was your behavior like at home growing up, going back as early as you can remember? Like, how did you behave? What was your behavior like?
Well, I have always been a troublemaker. I know that when my mother and father, when we all still basically lived in the same house, I basically did what I wanted, and I don't know, I think looking back now, I was looking for the attention that I wasn't getting, but this very early on, I basically did whatever I wanted. I would make fraudulent calls to the police department, barricade myself in rooms, I would destroy things, I would plant I'd plant things on people or in like common areas of the house. I think more than once I stumbled across my father's pornography stash, and I put it in the VCR and played it, and then paused it and turned off the television, so that when my mother and father and siblings came home, the first thing that they see when they turn the TV on is graphic pornography. I thought that shit was hilarious. I don't know if I ever really got out of that stage of thought. As far as misbehaving, as I got older, I don't know if it was so much to get attention, because at that point I had all the negative attention in the world. But I don't know, I've always had extremely adverse opinions to authority, like authority of any form, I was skipping school in like the first and second grade. I'd be told, I'd be told, hey, you got to get on the bus and go, and then I'd hide. I don't know, I've never, I'm trying to remember how early I got in legal trouble for the first time. I was probably like 14 or 15, but up until that point, I had done other illegal things, like broken into houses and vandalized things, stolen things. But up until then, I guess the authorities had not really been involved. But as far as behavior, I've always just kind of done what I wanted, and even in full knowledge of the potential for negative consequences, it's never really had any effect on my decision making for some reason, as far as doing the things that I wanted to do.
So what about your behavior in school, more so focusing on your middle school and high school years? How did you behave in school?
In middle school, I went through like a lot of like, so I know that all kids go through phases, you know, goth phases, emo phases, punk phases, whatever that, but mine were really, really dramatic. Like, I would be one thing one day and a different thing the next, but I mean, as far as behavior, erratic, dramatic, problematic. I fought a lot. I was always picking fights with somebody, or if someone said even one wrong thing or looked at me funny, I would immediately resort to resolving it through violence. I think it comes from, you know, I spent up so much of my early childhood being bullied and beaten up by people for essentially no reason. I guess that's just how I thought that problems had to be solved, you know what I mean? Into high school, I don't know, there was a lot of odd behavior. I had gone through a couple of phases where I had come out as homosexual and transgender, but I don't identify that way now. Not really. So I don't know why I seem to make such a big deal about it during those periods in my life, but it's almost as though those aspects of my identity took on personalities all their own.
So I know you spoke a little bit about this, but did you engage in any type of criminal activity as a juvenile? Can you expand on that a little bit?
I mean, yeah. So when I was, I don't know, like 8 or 9, me and a couple of friends, we went to this house on our street, and we basically broke in and then vandalized the whole place, and started breaking windows and a whole bunch of other dumb shit. And someone called the police, and they came by, and they picked me up, and they took me home, and they were like, look, you know, we're not going to charge him if you pay for it. To my father, they said, we won't charge him, but you're going to have to pay for the damage. Then moving forward, I don't know, it was probably, probably like 6th or 7th grade is when I started smoking marijuana and experimenting with other drugs, and eventually, sometime late in my time in middle school, I started cultivating marijuana plants. I didn't make it very far. My own father found the plants and then called the police on me, and that's how I got involved with the juvenile probation system, the juvenile legal system in Virginia. And I mean, I would adhere to the probationary terms, you know, don't get high, adhere to the curfew, don't break any laws. I might follow the rules for a couple of weeks, and then I'd be off doing whatever the fuck I wanted to do again. At the time, they said don't smoke weed, so I stopped smoking weed, and that's when I really started getting into other drugs like cocaine, dextromethorphan, LSD, mushrooms. I started drinking. I was just doing things that would essentially not show up on a urinalysis, right? I started skipping school like a lot. I got sent to a juvenile youth shelter a couple times. I got sent to the actual juvenile detention center a couple times, but I don't know. I guess it never stuck. As far as what them doing what they wanted me to do, I was never overly concerned with the behavior that they expected of me. So I just do what I want, really. I stayed in trouble basically throughout all my time as a juvenile, in some way, shape, or form or another.
So did you engage in any criminal activity as an adult prior to the case that you're serving time for now?
Absolutely. So when I was, my first son was conceived when I was 17 years old and born like 3 months after I turned 18. So I was already dealing with adult responsibilities basically by the time I was 18. I was working I was working at a grocery store trying to save money, but by the time that my son was born, I had my own place with the mother of my children, and we had fallen behind on some bills, so I partook in a couple of burglaries and break-ins just to, help get the rent together for the months that we were behind. And I got caught for 2 of them. One of them I ended up pleading out to a grand larceny, but the other one I had to take it was a statutory burglary. They sentenced me to 10 years and made me serve, They made me serve like 3 or 4 months. I caught a couple of possession charges, a domestic dispute that I ended up having to plead guilty to. Prior to the case that I'm currently incarcerated for, I was currently dealing with two distribution cases I was in court for and on pretrial for, out on bond. What else? I was on probation at the time, pretrial for a new case, 2 new cases, and then I caught the case that initially got me all the time. That statutory burglary was considered a violent charge, so by the time that I got arrested for the homicide, I was already a convicted violent felon like 3 or 4 times over.
So let's talk about the crime you're in prison for now. You're serving a 75-year prison sentence for the robbery murder of Jose Escobar Menendez. Can you walk me through everything that led up to the homicide and what the aftermath of the crime was?
So I guess leading up to the crime, there was I'd been released from jail January 1st or 2nd of 2020, and spent 6 months on the street. And the entire time that I spent on the street, I was selling drugs, trying to support myself and a drug habit and a girlfriend, and basically just doing all the things that I probably should not have been doing. I was, like I said, I was selling drugs, and I was not sleeping. I don't know. The whole 6 months that I was out, I probably slept maybe, 10, 15 times in 6 months. Something ridiculous like that. I was staying up for weeks at a time. And the day of the crime in question, I was going to go meet Mr. Menendez to sell him some drugs, and while I waited, it took, I don't know, like 30 or 45 minutes for him to get to where we were at, and during that time, I started experiencing delusions, you know what I mean? And I had become convinced that he was either setting me up with somebody that was trying to rob me, or the police, or trying to do me some sort of harm in some way. I became wholeheartedly convinced of that. So when he eventually showed up to where I was at, I didn't ask him any questions. I didn't even speak. I pulled him out of his vehicle and killed him and drove away in his vehicle. Because of the way that it looked like it was like a botched robbery, and there was never really any. There was not the intention, but the evidence was all very much stacked against me, because I did it. I just mean the evidence of a robbery when it wasn't the intention. As far as the aftermath, there's obviously the family's life that I ruined. You know what I mean? The life that I stole that I could not replace. I've done irrevocable damage to people for essentially no reason. It was one of the most senseless things, the senseless acts of violence that, you know what I mean, is terrible. The aftermath in my own life has been significant. I haven't spoken to my children, 2 out of my 3 brothers, my sister, any of my extended family. I haven't spoken to them since the 6 months leading up to the crime. I'll probably never speak to them again, and I can't blame them. I've lost friends. I've lost my life. More than just Mr. Menendez's life was lost that day. You know what I mean? It's been almost 4 years. Almost 4 years in July since I was arrested for the case. And during trial, I ended up starting trial, but not completing it because I knew that there was no way that I'd be able to beat the charges. And I thought if I just pled guilty, maybe I would get a little bit more leniency as far as my sentence. But they still went with the maximum, well, not the maximum, but the high end of my guidelines. And because I pled guilty, that waives all right to appeal. So I'm sitting down for it. You know what I mean? There's really no opportunity for me to get back in court or get any of the time back. And frankly, I tell people think I'm crazy because I tell them that even if I could, I wouldn't try. I don't believe there's any point. I think that, in all honesty, as far as the sentence, I got lucky, because I got a term of years when I could have got double life plus. And furthermore, I've done a lot more bad things than just the things that I'm convicted of at this time. So I don't even think that I really deserve the life that I have. So the fact that I'm still alive seems like a blessing sometimes, you know what I mean? And trying to get back in court and get back out on the street where I don't deserve to be, I don't know, it seems like it just doesn't seem right, you know what I mean?
Right. So after you were convicted and received your sentence of 75 years, how did you react emotionally?
Honestly, in the courtroom I smiled. When the judge read the verdict of 75 years in total, I smiled. because I wholeheartedly expected to get 2 life sentences, or 1 life sentence at least. Because, I mean, the facts of the case, the forensic specialists were able to work out that the bullet trajectory entered from the upper back of the gentleman's head, who was taller than me. So they know that it was an execution-style killing with essentially no motive. So when I got a term of years as opposed to a life sentence, initially I was relieved. You know what I mean? Initially I was relieved, but now that, time has gone on a little bit, it's been about a year since I received that sentence, and I still think about it every day. I have to look at these 4 walls and think, wow, I'm going to look at these walls until I'm about 90 years old, if I'm lucky enough to live that long and maintain all of the good time sentence credits that I'm going to get if I stay out of trouble, which is unlikely because I've already received a whole bunch of write-ups in the county jail, and I'll probably get more now that I'm in actual prison. So I don't know. I don't think I'll maintain the good time. So basically what it equals out to is I'm going to stare at these walls or very similar walls until the day that I die. It's overwhelming sometimes, man. It's fucking overwhelming. And I have to find reasons to motivate myself to not just hang it up, tie a sheet around my neck and end it. You know what I mean? That I don't think that I'll ever do that, and if it's not for any hope that I'll ever leave here, but I don't know, I feel like there's probably still something that I could do with my life if I apply myself. It's not over. I'm still alive. So my life is still here. It's just different than I ever anticipated it being, you know what I mean?
So nowadays, how do you spend your time in prison?
Since I've got to prison, we spend minimum 21 hours a day in the cell. So I do a lot of reading. I do a lot of writing. The few friends that I still have, I try to stay in touch with as best as I can. I exercise pretty religiously, you know what I mean? I think I like to take care of myself. And I like to try to have fun. People get mad at me because I walk around this place like I don't give a fuck about anything, and they're like, "Oh, you should be miserable." And I'm not happy, but I don't see the point in walking around hating my life. It's fucked up, don't get me wrong, but I'd much rather spend my day joking around, laughing, not taking things too serious. You know what I mean? I like to, I'm trying to get enrolled in programs and classes so I can educate myself and learn things just for the sake of learning. I love learning. But that's pretty much all I'm doing right now.
That was my interview with Gavin Collins. For extra content, ad-free episodes, and more, head on over to patreon.com/unforbiddentruth. Check out my new website, which is www.unforbiddentruth.com. Thank you for listening. Catch you on the next one. Unforbidden.